You've been trying to steal the man I love. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it. I didn't even know you loved me. I would never try to take someone from you.
The sky above London was pale grey when Xandile and Becky stepped off the bus and onto the busy street outside the university campus. The air was cold and crisp, far colder than anything she was used to back home in South Africa, and she instinctively wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Students rushed past her in every direction, their conversations blending into a low hum of voices. Some laughed loudly, others walked with headphones in their ears, and a few hurried while staring at their phones. Xandile stood still for a moment, taking it all in. This was it. The moment she had imagined for years. Studying abroad had once felt like an impossible dream, something people talked about but rarely achieved. Yet somehow, through endless nights of studying, scholarships, and her mother's unwavering encouragement, she had made it here. She lifted her eyes toward the tall stone building in front of her. The university crest was carved above the entrance, its old architecture giving the place a sense of history and importance. A quiet nervousness settled in her chest. You belong here, she reminded herself. But the voice of doubt was still there. What if she wasn't good enough? What if everyone else was smarter? What if she couldn't keep up? She shook the thoughts away and adjusted the strap of her bag. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, warm and steady the way it always was. Remember who you are, Xandile. You carry your father's strength and my stubbornness. That means nothing in this world can defeat you. Xandile smiled softly at the memory. Her father had passed away when she was 16, and since then her mother had become her entire world. Every sacrifice, every extra shift at work, every encouraging word had been given so that Xandile could reach this moment. Failure was not an option. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the entrance. Inside, the campus building buzzed with activity. Students clustered around notice boards, while others searched for lecture halls or chatted with new classmates. Xandile checked the schedule on her phone. Business Administration. Lecture Hall C. She followed the hallway signs until she found the room. The large lecture hall doors were open. She paused at the entrance. Rows of seats stretched downward toward the professor's podium, already filled with students talking and laughing with each other. Some clearly knew one another already, while others looked just as lost as she felt. Her heart began to race. This was the moment when friendships began. Or when loneliness did. She stepped inside quietly and scanned the room for an empty seat. Most of them were taken. A few students glanced up briefly before returning to their conversations. Xandile suddenly felt very aware that she was alone. She considered sitting near the back, but something about that felt like hiding. Instead, she walked a little farther down the steps, still searching. Then a cheerful voice broke through the noise. Hey, you. Xandile turned her head, surprised. A young woman with long black hair was waving at her from a seat halfway down the row. Her smile was bright and welcoming, as if they already knew each other. You look like you're deciding whether to escape, the girl said playfully. Xandile laughed despite her nerves. Is it that obvious? A little. The girl gestured toward the empty seat beside her. You can sit here if you want. Relief flooded through Xandile. Thank you. She moved down the steps and sat beside her. Up close, the girl looked effortlessly stylish, with sharp features and expressive eyes that seemed full of curiosity. I'm Ensu Park, she said, offering her hand. Xandile and Becky. Ensu repeated the name slowly, carefully pronouncing each syllable. Xandile. Xandile smiled. That's actually perfect. Really? Most people struggle with it. Well, I practiced in my head before saying it, Ensu admitted. That made Xandile laugh again. Where are you from? Ensu asked. South Africa. Ensu's eyes widened slightly. That's incredible. You came really far. It feels even farther now that I'm here, Xandile admitted. I understand, Ensu said sympathetically. Everything feels unfamiliar at first. And where are you from? South Korea. Oh wow. They exchanged small smiles. Despite their completely different backgrounds, something about the conversation felt easy and natural. The professor entered a moment later and the lecture began. For the next hour, Xandile focused carefully on the lesson, jotting down notes as quickly as she could. Occasionally, she noticed Ensu scribbling comments in the margins of her notebook and suppressing quiet laughter. At one point she leaned closer and whispered, He's explaining this like it's the most dramatic story ever told. Xandile bit her lip to stop herself from laughing. The tension she had felt earlier slowly faded. When the lecture finally ended, students began packing their bags. Ensu stretched her arms above her head and sighed. First lecture survived. Xandile nodded. Barely. They both laughed. As they walked out of the lecture hall together, Ensu suddenly asked, "Do you have any plans today?" Xandile shook her head. "Just exploring the campus, I guess." "In that case," Ensu said, "you should come with me for coffee." Xandile blinked. "Now?" "Of course now," Ensu replied with a grin. University rule number 1. No one survives the first week without caffeine. That made Xandile smile. "Okay." They walked together across the campus courtyard, where students sat on benches or gathered under trees discussing classes. The cafe near the entrance smelled like fresh pastries and roasted coffee beans. They found a small table near the window. For the next hour they talked about everything. Xandile told her about growing up in South Africa, about her mother's cooking, and about how much she missed the warm weather. Ensu shared stories about her childhood in Korea and how strange London felt compared to home. They discovered small similarities between them. Both loved late night studying with music. Both enjoyed cooking. Both had chosen business studies because they wanted to build something meaningful in the future. By the time they finished their drinks, the awkwardness of meeting a stranger had completely disappeared. As they stepped outside, Ensu suddenly said, "You know, finding a place to live in London is impossible." Xandile laughed. "You're telling me? I've been looking for weeks." "Same." Ensu stopped walking and looked at her thoughtfully. "What if we shared an apartment?" Xandile blinked in surprise. "Already?" "Well," Ensu said casually, "we seem to get along. And rent would be cheaper." Xandile considered the idea. Moving in with someone she had just met sounded crazy. But something about Ensu felt trustworthy. And she did need a roommate. "Okay," she said slowly. "Maybe we could look at some places." Ensu's face lit up. "Perfect." As they continued walking across campus, neither of them realized how important that moment was. Two strangers from opposite sides of the world had met by chance in a lecture hall. Soon they would become best friends. They would share an apartment, share their struggles, share their dreams, and unknowingly step into a future where their friendship would one day face a test neither of them could imagine. But for now, everything was simple. It was just the first day of university, and the beginning of a friendship that would change both their lives forever. The small apartment Xandile and Ensu eventually found sat on the third floor of an old brick building in London. It was not luxurious by any means, but to them it felt perfect. The living room was narrow but cozy, with a wide window that overlooked a busy street below. The kitchen was barely large enough for two people to stand comfortably, and the bedrooms were modest, but the rent was manageable, especially since they were splitting it. On the day they moved in, cardboard boxes filled every corner of the apartment. Xandile stood in the middle of the living room holding a small potted plant. "Where should this go?" she asked. Ensu, who was kneeling beside an open suitcase full of clothes, looked up thoughtfully. "Near the window. Plants like sunlight." Xandile placed it carefully on the windowsill. The little green leaves brightened the room instantly. "Perfect," Ensu said with a satisfied nod. Xandile stepped back and looked around the apartment again. It still looked chaotic, but there was something comforting about it. It felt like the beginning of something important. "Can you believe we actually did it?" Xandile asked. "Moved to London?" "No. Found an apartment that doesn't cost our entire future." Ensu laughed. "That was a miracle." They continued unpacking for the rest of the afternoon, occasionally pausing to admire something they had arranged or to complain about how heavy their luggage had been. By evening, the apartment finally looked somewhat livable. Xandile collapsed onto the couch with a tired sigh. "My back hurts." "You carried half the boxes," Ensu replied, bringing 2 glasses of juice from the kitchen. Xandile accepted the drink gratefully. "You helped too." "Yes," Ensu admitted, "but you definitely worked harder." They sat quietly for a moment, enjoying the simple comfort of rest. Outside the window, the evening lights of London flickered to life. The sound of traffic and distant laughter drifted up from the street below. Xandile rested her head against the couch and smiled softly. "This city feels so alive." "It never sleeps," Ensu said. "I believe that." A few minutes later, Xandile's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face brightened instantly. "It's my mother." "Answer it," Ensu said. Xandile quickly picked up the call. "Hello, Mama." Her voice immediately softened in the warm way it always did when she spoke to her mother. "Yes, we moved in today. Yes, the apartment is nice. No, it's not too expensive." She listened quietly for a moment, smiling. Then she turned the phone toward Ensu. "Mama says hello." Ensu leaned closer to the phone. "Hello, Mama Xandile." Her pronunciation was careful but cheerful. Xandile's mother laughed on the other end of the call. That must be the friend you told me about. Xandile nodded instinctively even though her mother couldn't see it. Yes, Mama. This is Ensu. Well, take care of my daughter, her mother said warmly. I will, Ensu promised. After a few more minutes, Xandile ended the call. You and your mother are close, Ensu observed. Very. Xandile looked down at her phone for a moment. She's the strongest person I know. How so? Xandile leaned back against the couch. My father died when I was 16. Ensu's expression softened. I'm sorry. It was hard at first, Xandile admitted quietly. But my mother never let it destroy us. What does she do? She works in a local government office. The pay isn't amazing, but she always made sure I had everything I needed. Ensu listened carefully. Xandile continued, she believes education changes lives. That's why she pushed me to apply for scholarships and study abroad. And look at you now, Ensu said with a smile. Xandile laughed softly. I'm still figuring things out. That's normal. A comfortable silence filled the room for a moment. Then Ensu suddenly said, My family is the opposite. Xandile looked at her curiously. What do you mean? In my family, everything is planned. Planned? Yes, Ensu said, leaning back in her chair. School, career, future. Even how we behave in public. That sounds stressful. It can be. Xandile tilted her head slightly. But you don't seem stressed. That's because this, Ensu gestured around the apartment, is the first time I've ever lived independently. Xandile blinked in surprise. Really? In my parents' house, we had staff for everything. Xandile's eyebrows lifted slightly. For everything? Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Wow. That's why I wanted to study abroad, Ensu admitted. To experience real life? Exactly. Xandile laughed. Well, you're definitely experiencing it now. Tell me about it, Ensu said, pointing toward the sink. I just realized dishes don't wash themselves. They both burst out laughing. Despite their very different backgrounds, their friendship continued to grow stronger over the following months. University life kept them busy. Lectures filled their mornings. Group projects and assignments occupied their afternoons. Late-night studying often stretched far into the early hours of the morning. Sometimes they studied at the library. Other times they spread their books across the living room floor, surrounded by snacks and coffee. One night, around midnight, Xandile looked up from her laptop and groaned. My brain has stopped working. Ensu rubbed her eyes. Same. They both stared at their textbooks in silence. Finally, Ensu closed hers. That's it. I refuse to read another sentence tonight. Agreed. They ordered takeout and watched a movie instead. Moments like those became their favorite memories. They celebrated small victories together. Good grades, successful presentations, difficult exams passed. But there were also difficult days. Days when Xandile missed her mother terribly. Days when homesickness crept in unexpectedly. On those nights, she often stood by the window staring at the city lights. Ensu would quietly join her. You're thinking about home, she would say. Xandile would nod. Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to stay here. You are, Ensu would say confidently. How do you know? Because you've already made it this far. Xandile would smile softly at those words. And slowly she began to believe them. Over time, their friendship became something deeper than simple companionship. They supported each other through challenges, encouraged each other through doubts, and celebrated each other's dreams. But despite their closeness, the differences in their lives remained clear. Xandile valued every opportunity she had earned. Every exam felt like a step toward building a better future for herself and her mother. Ensu, meanwhile, was trying to prove something different. She wanted to show the world, and perhaps her own family, that she could succeed on her own. Not because of wealth, but because of her abilities. Two young women. Two different worlds. Yet somehow their lives had intertwined in a quiet apartment in London. Neither of them realized yet that the future would soon bring challenges far greater than difficult exams or late-night study sessions. Challenges that would test their friendship, their loyalty, and their hearts. But for now, their story was still simple. Two friends sharing dreams in a city full of possibilities. Graduation day passed in what felt like a blur. There had been cheers, photographs, hugs, and endless congratulations as hundreds of students celebrated the end of their years of study at the university in London. For Xandile Mbeki, the moment she held her degree felt almost unreal. For years earlier she had arrived from South Africa with nothing but determination and the prayers of her mother. Now she was officially a graduate. She and Ensu Park had taken dozens of photos together that day, laughing as they threw their caps into the air with the rest of the students. The ceremony itself had been short, but the meaning behind it felt enormous. It marked the end of one chapter of their lives, and the beginning of another. But the excitement of graduation did not last forever. Reality arrived quickly. Within 2 weeks, the joyful atmosphere had been replaced by something else: uncertainty. The future. Every morning after graduation, Xandile woke up early in their small apartment and opened her laptop. Job applications. That had become her new routine. She carefully edited her resume, wrote cover letters, and sent applications to company after company. Some days she sent 10 applications. Other days 15. Weeks passed, and the responses were always the same. Thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, we regret to inform you. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence. One afternoon she sat at the dining table staring at another email. Another rejection. Her shoulders sagged. Across the room, Ensu noticed her expression. Another one? Xandile sighed. Yeah. How many applications have you sent this week? 17. Ensu's eyes widened. 17. And none of them worked out, Xandile said quietly. She closed her laptop and rubbed her temples. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I didn't think it would be this hard. Ensu walked over and sat beside her. You'll find something. I hope so. Xandile tried to smile, but worry lingered in her eyes. Back home in South Africa, her mother asked about her job search every time they spoke on the phone. Xandile always told her the same thing. I'm still applying. Her mother never sounded disappointed. Instead, she always responded with the same gentle encouragement. Keep trying, my daughter. Your opportunity will come. Xandile wanted to believe that, but some days it felt very far away. Meanwhile, life was moving forward quickly for Ensu. Unlike Xandile, she had something Xandile did not: powerful family connections. One evening, Ensu burst through the apartment door with excitement written all over her face. Xandile. Xandile looked up from the couch. What happened? Ensu held up her phone like it was a trophy. I got the job. Xandile immediately stood up. You did? Yes. She rushed forward and hugged Xandile tightly. They called me this morning. Xandile pulled back with a huge smile. That's amazing. I start next month. Where? Ensu sat down excitedly. At a tech company. What kind of company? A very big one, Ensu said proudly. My father helped connect me with them. Xandile nodded. That makes sense. In Korea, our families know each other, Ensu continued. My father and the owner's father have been friends for many years. That must have helped a lot. It definitely opened the door, Ensu admitted. Xandile wasn't jealous. If anything, she was genuinely happy for her friend. You deserve it, she said sincerely. I'm starting in a management position, Ensu continued. Xandile blinked in surprise. Management already? Ensu laughed slightly. I know it sounds crazy, but they believe I can handle it. I believe you can too. Ensu leaned back against the couch. The company is huge. It has offices all over the world. What's it called? Xandile asked. Hangul Group. Xandile repeated the name slowly. Hangul Group. Yeah, Ensu said. It's one of the fastest growing tech companies right now. That sounds impressive. The CEO built most of the company himself, Ensu added. Really? Yes. He's known for being incredibly smart and extremely strict. Xandile laughed. That sounds intimidating. Maybe a little. So what will you be doing exactly? I'll be helping oversee administrative operations for one of the divisions. Xandile nodded thoughtfully. That's a big responsibility. It is. For a moment, silence filled the room. Xandile glanced at her laptop on the table. Another job application waited to be completed. She quickly pushed the thought aside. Tonight was about celebrating Ensu. We need to celebrate this, she said suddenly. Ensu smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. They ordered food from their favorite restaurant and bought a small cake from the shop down the street. When the food arrived, they sat on the floor of the living room just like they had done many times during university. Xandile raised her glass. To your new job. Ensu clinked her glass against Xandile's. To new beginnings. They both drank. You know, Ensu said thoughtfully, once I start working, I'll try to learn everything I can about the company. Of course. And maybe later. I might even help you find something. Xandile waved her hand dismissively. You don't have to worry about that. I want to. You should focus on your new job. I can do both, Ensu insisted. Xandile smiled softly. We'll see. That night, after the celebration ended, Xandile stood by the window looking out at the glowing city lights of London. Behind her, Ensu was already asleep on the couch. Xandile felt proud of her friend. She truly did. But deep inside, she couldn't ignore the quiet anxiety growing in her chest. Ensu's future had already begun, and Xandile was still waiting for hers to start. She picked up her laptop again and opened another job application. If there was one thing her mother had taught her, it was this. Never stop trying. Even when the world seemed determined to close every door. Because someday one door would open. And when it did, Xandile intended to be ready. 6 months had passed since Ensu Park began working at Hangul Group in London. In that short time, she had already learned one important truth about the company. Everything revolved around one man. Hangul Kim. The young billionaire CEO was respected, feared, and constantly watched by everyone in the organization. His decisions shaped the company, his standards set the pace, and his presence alone could silence an entire conference room. Ensu saw him almost every day during meetings or brief discussions in the executive corridors. And every time she saw him, the quiet feeling she had carried for years resurfaced. Their families had known each other back in South Korea. Because of that, she had always believed there was a special understanding between them. But working for him had revealed something else. Hangul was distant, professional, completely focused on his company. During her first month at work, she had tried to reconnect with him outside the office. One evening after a long meeting, she walked beside him toward the elevators. Hangul, she said lightly, are you free this weekend? He barely slowed his steps. Why? I was thinking we could have dinner. It's been a long time since we talked properly. Hangul pressed the elevator button. I'll be working. The doors opened and he stepped inside. Conversation over. The second time she tried was a few weeks later. Would you like to get coffee after work? She asked when they crossed paths in the hallway. I have another meeting, he replied calmly. Again, nothing more. At first she told herself he was simply busy. But weeks turned into months and every invitation ended the same way. A polite refusal. It began to worry her. Not because he rejected her directly, but because he never seemed interested in anything beyond work. Still, Ensu pushed those thoughts aside and focused on her responsibilities. She worked long hours and handled her projects efficiently, determined to prove she deserved the position she had been given. But every evening when she returned home, she was reminded of someone else's struggle. Xandile Becky. Her best friend since their first day at university. While Ensu's career had taken off quickly, Xandile was still searching for work. Most nights she sat at the dining table with her laptop open, sending applications to companies across London. Sometimes she looked hopeful. Other times she looked tired. But she never stopped trying. One night after returning from work, Ensu paused at the doorway and watched her friend typing another application. How many today? She asked. Xandile looked up. 11. In one day. I'm trying to increase my chances. Ensu walked over and sat down beside her. You shouldn't have to work this hard just to get noticed. That's life, Xandile said with a small smile. But something about her calm determination made Ensu feel guilty. She knew how easily doors had opened for her. And how firmly they seemed to remain closed for Xandile. That night, Ensu made a decision. The next afternoon at the office, she walked toward the executive floor. The higher levels of the building were quieter, more controlled. Assistants moved quickly between offices and employees spoke in hushed voices. At the end of the corridor stood the largest office in the building. Hangul's office. She knocked gently. Come in. His voice carried its usual calm authority. Ensu stepped inside. The room was spacious and elegant, with tall windows overlooking the city skyline. Hangul sat behind his desk reviewing documents. Without looking up, he asked, What do you need? Ensu, she said. Now he lifted his eyes. Yes. I wanted to ask you something. He leaned back slightly in his chair. That sounds serious. It's about my friend. He remained silent, waiting for her to continue. She graduated with me from university, Ensu said. She's very capable and has been searching for a job for months. Hangul studied her expression carefully. And? I was hoping the company could give her a chance. He raised an eyebrow. You're asking me to hire her. No, Ensu said quickly. Just give her the opportunity to interview. Hangul tapped his fingers lightly on the desk as he considered her request. You know we have a recruitment process. I'm not asking you to change it. Then what are you asking? Let HR interview her, Ensu said calmly. If she passes, she deserves the job. There was a brief silence. Finally, Hangul reached for the phone on his desk. He pressed a button. Yes, sir, someone answered. This is Hangul, he said. Yes, sir. Schedule an interview for a candidate named Xandile Mbeki. Understood. If she passes the interview, Hangul continued, offer her the position. Of course, sir. He ended the call and looked back at Ensu. That's the most I can do. Relief spread across her face. That's all I was hoping for. If she fails, he added calmly, she doesn't get the job. That's fair. Hangul nodded slightly before returning to the papers on his desk. The conversation was clearly finished. Ensu thanked him and quietly left the office. As she walked back to her own department, a small smile appeared on her face. For the first time in months, she felt hopeful about Xandile's future. That evening when she arrived home, Xandile was again sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. Ensu placed her bag down and walked over. You should check your email tomorrow morning, she said casually. Xandile looked up in confusion. Why? Because you might be receiving something interesting. What kind of email? Ensu smiled. An interview invitation. Xandile blinked. Wait, what? I spoke to someone at the company today. The realization slowly dawned on Xandile's face. You didn't? I did. For a moment, Xandile was completely speechless. Then she stood up suddenly. Ensu. Relax, Ensu laughed. You still have to pass the interview. But Xandile's eyes were already shining with excitement. After months of uncertainty, a door had finally opened. Neither of them realized that this single opportunity would soon change all of their lives forever. The email arrived 2 days after the interview. Xandile had been sitting at the dining table in their apartment in London, nervously refreshing her inbox every few minutes. She had tried to stay calm after the interview, but deep inside she knew how much depended on the outcome. When the notification finally appeared, her heart began to race. She stared at the screen for several seconds before opening the message. Her eyes moved quickly across the words. Then suddenly she gasped. Ensu. Her voice echoed across the apartment. Ensu rushed out of her room. What happened? Xandile stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over. I got it. What? The job. For a moment Ensu simply stared at her. Then she broke into a wide smile. You passed the interview? Yes. Xandile turned the laptop toward her so she could see the email. It was official. Hangul Group had offered her the position of administrative assistant. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the message again. Months of worry. Months of rejection. And now finally, an opportunity. Ensu laughed and hugged her tightly. I told you could do it. Xandile hugged her back. No, she said honestly. You helped me. I only helped you get the interview. But without that, I wouldn't even have had the chance. Ensu waved her hand dismissively. You earned the job yourself. Xandile's eyes were shining with excitement. I have to call my mother. Of course you do. Xandile quickly grabbed her phone and stepped toward the window where the signal was stronger. The call connected after a few seconds. Mama? My daughter, her mother answered warmly from South Africa. I got a job. There was a moment of silence. Then her mother's joyful voice burst through the phone. You did? Yes. What kind of job? It's at a technology company here in London. That's wonderful news. Xandile laughed, relief flooding her voice. I start next week. Her mother sounded emotional. I knew your time would come. I almost gave up. You never gave up, her mother corrected gently. You kept trying. Xandile smiled. And my friend helped me. Then she is a good friend. The best. After the call ended, Xandile stood quietly for a moment, holding her phone. Her future finally felt like it was moving forward. Behind her, Ensu was already planning how they would celebrate. Tonight we are going out, she announced. Out? Yes. This deserves a proper celebration. Xandile laughed. Okay. A week later, Xandile stood in front of the large glass building that housed Hangul Group. Her first day. The building rose high above the surrounding streets of London, its reflective windows catching the morning sunlight. For a moment she simply stood there, taking it all in. This was real. She smoothed her skirt nervously and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the lobby was enormous and elegant. Employees moved quickly across the polished floors, many dressed in expensive suits and carrying tablets or briefcases. Xandile suddenly felt very aware that this was a powerful company. Still, she lifted her chin and approached the reception desk. "Good morning," the receptionist said politely. "I'm Xandile Mbeki. Today is my first day." The receptionist smiled. "Welcome to Hangul Group. HR is expecting you." Soon she was guided upstairs to the Human Resources Department, where she completed the remaining paperwork and received her company badge. A friendly HR manager named Laura gave her a tour of the office. "This is the administrative department," Laura explained as they walked past rows of desks and computers. Employees glanced up as they passed. Some nodded politely. Others stared a little longer. Xandile noticed the attention but tried to ignore it. "You'll be assisting several senior managers," Laura continued. "Your role is important because you help keep operations running smoothly." "I understand," Xandile said. Finally, Laura stopped near a desk. "This will be your workspace." Xandile smiled. "Thank you." But even as she sat down, she could feel the curious glances from people nearby. A few employees whispered quietly to one another. Others simply watched her. It wasn't hostile, just curious. Her presence had clearly been noticed. By lunchtime, nearly everyone on the floor had seen the new employee, and many had the same reaction. She was striking. Xandile carried herself with a quiet elegance that felt natural rather than forced. Her dark skin glowed softly in the office lighting, and her confident posture made her stand out even more. Yet she seemed unaware of the attention. She simply focused on learning her work. Later that afternoon, Laura returned to her desk. "The CEO is meeting with department staff today," she said. Xandile blinked. "The CEO? Yes. It's routine. New employees are sometimes introduced." A small wave of nervousness passed through her. Minutes later, she was led toward a large conference room. Several managers were already seated. At the head of the table stood a tall man speaking quietly with another executive. Laura approached him. "Sir, this is the new administrative assistant I mentioned." The man turned. For the first time, Hangul Kim saw Xandile Mbeki. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. Hangul had met thousands of people throughout his career. Executives, politicians, investors. But the young woman standing in front of him was different. There was a natural grace about her. Not the polished confidence of someone raised in wealth, but something quieter, more genuine. Her beauty was striking yet simple. Her posture calm. Her expression respectful. And her eyes, steady. Hangul looked at her slightly longer than he intended. "This is Xandile Mbeki," Laura continued. Xandile offered a polite greeting. "Good afternoon, sir." Hangul nodded slowly. "Welcome to Hangul Group." His voice remained calm, but something in his expression had changed. Something curious. Something interested. For reasons he did not yet understand, the presence of this young woman had already caught his attention. And across the room, a pair of eyes was watching the moment closely. Ensu's. She smiled proudly at her friend, completely unaware that this introduction would soon change everything between them. Xandile's first morning at Hangul Group had been overwhelming. By the time coffee break arrived, she felt both exhausted and exhilarated. She walked into the small break room, carrying her cup of steaming coffee, and found Ensu leaning casually against the counter, scrolling on her phone. "Well, look at you," Ensu said, eyes sparkling with amusement. "How's your first morning going?" Xandile smiled nervously. "Busy, everyone seems very focused." Ensu laughed softly, shaking her head. "Focused? Maybe. But mostly staring." Xandile blinked. "Staring?" "Yes," Ensu said, leaning closer conspiratorially. "Everyone is looking at you. They're talking about you. They're admiring you." Xandile's cheeks flushed slightly. "Admiring me?" Ensu grinned. "You're not even trying and everyone notices. The way you carry yourself, the confidence, the calm. And honestly, you're stunning. People can't help it." Xandile tried to hide her smile behind her coffee cup. I didn't even notice." "That's what makes it worse," Ensu said, laughing. "You have this natural charm that's impossible to ignore. Just don't trip over yourself in front of the CEO or everyone will know we've been talking." Xandile laughed lightly, feeling a little more relaxed. "Thanks for the warning. But I think I can manage." Ensu nudged her playfully. "Oh, you'll manage just fine. Just know that people are definitely noticing you, especially him." Xandile froze slightly, remembering the earlier introduction. She had met Hangul Kim briefly when Laura introduced her in the conference room, but she had only said a polite, "Good afternoon." "You mean the CEO?" she asked cautiously. Ensu nodded, eyes twinkling. "Yes, him." He doesn't look at people twice usually, but, well, he noticed you. I caught the way he glanced in your direction a few times during the introduction. You're different, Xandile. He couldn't help it. Xandile felt her stomach flutter. Really? Really? Ensu laughed again, shaking her head. But don't let it go to your head. You have work to do. Just enjoy the attention if you can. Xandile took a sip of her coffee, trying to steady her heartbeat. She hadn't expected so much attention, nor did she know how to react to it. Yet, hearing Ensu's teasing words made her feel lighter. You make it sound like I'm some kind of celebrity, she said. You might as well be, Ensu replied with a grin. Just don't forget who helped you get here. Xandile's smile softened. I won't. I'll never forget it. The two friends laughed together, enjoying the moment of respite from the busy office floor. And as they left the break room and returned to their desks, Xandile couldn't help but feel a quiet thrill. She had only just begun her first day, and already the energy of the office, the curious glances, and even the attention from Hangul Kim had made her feel noticed in a way she had never experienced before. Little did she know, that first subtle glance of admiration was the beginning of something neither of them could ignore, an attraction that would slowly grow stronger with every shared project, every interaction, and every quiet moment in the office. By the second week of Xandile's first month at Hangul Group, Hangul Kim had begun to notice something he hadn't anticipated. At first, it was just a fleeting distraction. He was reviewing reports in his office one morning when he caught sight of her moving through the workspace, calm, composed, quietly efficient. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but there was a natural grace in how she handled herself, the subtle confidence that seemed to flow from everything she did. It annoyed him. He prided himself on his focus. His schedule was precise. Every decision, every minute accounted for. And yet, ever since she had started, his attention seemed to drift whenever she was nearby. I can't allow this, he muttered to himself, tapping a pen against his desk. This is a distraction. The next day he intentionally assigned her more work. Not menial tasks, but challenging projects that would demand her full attention. He was determined to redirect his wandering thoughts. Xandile accepted the assignments with quiet determination. She asked thoughtful questions when necessary, organized her time efficiently, and executed the tasks with precision. Within a few days, the results exceeded expectations. Reports were accurate, projects were completed ahead of schedule, and even her co-workers began to notice her competence. Hangul watched from his office, sometimes inspecting the progress reports himself. He couldn't deny it, she was brilliant. Not only was she hardworking, but she had a mind that approached problems logically, creatively, and decisively. Every task he had given her was handled with skill and thoughtfulness. And with every success his admiration grew. It was frustrating. He had always maintained control, a professional distance from those around him. But her intelligence, her diligence, and the way she carried herself made it increasingly difficult to remain indifferent. One afternoon, he found himself walking toward her desk under the guise of checking on the project. Xandile, he said, his voice calm. I want you to take the lead on this report. Make sure it's comprehensive. She looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. Of course, sir. I'll start immediately. He nodded curtly and turned back toward his office, but his mind lingered longer than usual. She had handled far more than her position demanded, and yet she never complained. Her dedication was quiet but undeniable. Later that evening, as he reviewed the day's progress, Hangul leaned back in his chair. He admitted it silently, though only to himself. He respected her work immensely. And it irritated him just as much as it intrigued him. She had become more than a capable employee. She had earned his attention not through charm or strategy, but through sheer brilliance and perseverance. And as the days passed, every report completed flawlessly, every question answered thoughtfully, every project executed efficiently, his admiration grew in ways he hadn't expected. And he realized that controlling his focus was no longer entirely possible. Xandile was quietly, steadily, earning a place in his mind he hadn't planned to give her. And Hangul, for all his discipline and control, found that realization both frustrating and compelling. The weeks passed quickly at Hangul Group in London. For Xandile, work had become both exciting and demanding. Every day brought new tasks, new reports, and new responsibilities. What surprised her most, however, was how often the assignments came directly from Hangul Kim. At first, she believed it was simply because he expected excellence from everyone. But gradually she began to notice something different. He trusted her with important work. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, a message from his assistant would appear on her desk. The CEO would like you to assist with a report. The first time it happened, Xandile felt extremely nervous walking into his office. Hangul looked up briefly when she entered. Sit, he said calmly, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. A stack of documents lay before him. I want you to review these numbers and tell me what you think. She hesitated slightly. My opinion? Yes. Xandile took the papers and began reading carefully. After a few minutes she looked up. The projections are strong, she said slowly, but the market analysis is incomplete. Hangul raised an eyebrow. In what way? She pointed to a section in the report. This region is expanding faster than predicted. If the company adjusts its strategy here, the results could be even stronger. Hangul studied her for a moment. Then a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You noticed that quickly. Xandile shrugged slightly. It seemed obvious. From that day onward he asked for her input more often. Sometimes the conversations were strictly about work. But slowly the atmosphere changed. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, Xandile was still working at her desk when Hangul walked past. You're still here? She looked up. Yes. I wanted to finish the report tonight. He glanced at the clock. It's late. I don't mind. For a moment he stood there quietly. Then he said, bring the report to my office when you're done. An hour later she knocked on his door. Come in. His office was dimly lit, the city lights of London glowing through the large windows. She handed him the finished report. Hangul skimmed through the pages. This is good work. Thank you. He leaned back in his chair. Sit for a moment. Xandile hesitated before sitting down. What made you choose this career path? He asked suddenly. The question surprised her. I like solving problems, she said. And I enjoy learning new things. Hangul nodded slowly. You've proven that. She smiled slightly. Thank you, sir. Hangul, he corrected calmly. She blinked. Sir? You can call me Hangul when we're working like this. That was the first time their conversation felt less formal. After that night, the late evenings became more frequent. Sometimes they stayed in the office discussing strategies and reports. Other times their conversations drifted beyond work. They talked about travel, about different cultures, about their families. One evening Xandile told him about growing up in South Africa. My mother raised me alone after my father passed away, she said quietly. Hangul listened carefully. You must admire her very much. She's my entire world. For a moment, something thoughtful crossed his expression. I understand that. Occasionally they even laughed together. One night, when Xandile accidentally spilled coffee on a stack of documents, she gasped in horror. I'm so sorry. Hangul looked at the stained papers and then began to laugh softly. The sound surprised both of them. I think the report survived, he said. Xandile laughed too, relieved. The atmosphere between them had changed completely. What began as professional cooperation was slowly becoming something more comfortable, more natural. But not everyone in the office was unaware. One evening, as most employees prepared to leave, Ensu walked past the conference room. Through the glass walls she saw something that made her stop. Inside the room, Hangul and Xandile were sitting across from each other. Papers were spread across the table. But they were not discussing reports at that moment. They were laughing. Xandile had said something that made Hangul smile, a rare sight in the office. Ensu's expression slowly changed. At first it was surprise, then confusion, then something darker. She stood there for a few seconds longer, watching them. They looked comfortable together. Too comfortable. A strange knot tightened in her chest. For years she had admired Hangul. She had imagined that one day he might see her differently. Yet in all the months she had worked there, he had never laughed with her like that. But now, he was laughing with Xandile, her best friend. Ensu quietly walked away from the corridor, her heels echoing softly against the floor. By the time she reached the elevator, her smile was gone. Something unpleasant had begun to grow in her heart, and she wasn't sure how to stop it. It didn't happen overnight, but over the next few weeks, Xandile began to notice the change. Ensu had become distant. She no longer laughed with Xandile at home the way they used to. She ate alone, often arriving home late or leaving early, carefully avoiding her friend. At work, Ensu had become cold, subtly critical. She questioned Xandile's decisions during meetings, suggested corrections even when none were needed, and often left her remarks just loud enough for others to hear. Xandile tried to brush it off, telling herself Ensu was stressed or preoccupied with her high-pressure position. But the tension was impossible to ignore. One evening, Xandile returned home earlier than usual. She found the apartment unusually quiet. The lights in the kitchen were off, and the faint smell of reheated food lingered in the air. Ensu was sitting at the dining table eating alone, scrolling through her phone. Xandile hesitated at the door for a moment. "Ensu?" she said softly. Ensu didn't look up. Xandile stepped closer. "Can we talk?" Ensu set her fork down slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Talk about what?" she asked coldly. Xandile swallowed. "About us. You've been avoiding me. Eating alone. Leaving before I get home. And at work you've been incompetent." Ensu interrupted sharply, her voice rising. "Careful, Xandile. Don't pretend you don't know why I'm angry." Xandile blinked, confused. I don't understand. Angry about what?" Ensu's eyes were blazing now. "Don't lie to me. You've been spending all this time with him, with Hangul. Laughing, working late, getting his attention." Xandile shook her head, heart pounding. "I didn't do anything wrong, Ensu. I'm just doing my job. He's my CEO and I'm focused on learning and performing well. That's all." Ensu stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. "Don't lie. You've been trying to steal the man I love. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it." Xandile felt her chest tighten. She had never expected this. Never imagined that Ensu would see her in this way. Ensu, I didn't," she began. "You did," Ensu interrupted. "Even if you didn't realize it, you did. You've been spending time with him, sharing jokes, staying late. You've crossed the line." Tears threatened Xandile's eyes, not just because of the accusation but because of the hurt it caused. Ensu had been her closest friend for years, her sister in all but blood. And now, the woman she trusted most believed she had betrayed her. "I never intended to," Xandile tried again. "You never intended to what?" Ensu snapped. "To ruin my life? To steal the person I've loved for years? Because that's exactly what this is." Xandile shook her head violently. "I didn't even know. I would never try to take someone from you." Ensu's face hardened, and for a moment the apartment felt impossibly cold. "Then why did it feel like you were trying?" she demanded. "Why are you always around him, laughing, spending time with him? Don't tell me it's just work. I see it. Everyone sees it." "I didn't mean for anything to happen." Xandile's voice shook. "I was just doing my job. He's my CEO and I respect him, nothing else. I care about my work and doing things right." Ensu's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. She looked away as if struggling with the storm inside her. "You think saying that makes it okay?" she whispered. "You think I can just ignore that? You've been taking everything I care about and making me invisible." Xandile stepped closer, pleading. "Ensu, please. I never wanted to hurt you. You're my best friend. Always. Nothing I've done has changed that." Ensu turned sharply, her eyes flashing again. "Don't talk to me like that. You've betrayed me. You've stolen what's mine even without trying." And with that, she gathered her bag and left the apartment, leaving Xandile standing in the kitchen, trembling, heartbroken, and stunned by the sudden fracture in their friendship. For the first time since they had met, Xandile realized that the office, and her connection with Hangul, had created a rift between her and the person she loved most. She had no idea how to fix it. All she could do was hope. And try to survive the cold distance of the friend she had once called her sister. The following day was the weekend, a day Xandile normally looked forward to. She had grown used to meeting Hangul after the workweek, reviewing reports together or just sharing a quiet lunch away from the office. But today was different. After the confrontation with Ensu the night before, she couldn't bear the thought of seeing anyone. Not her friend. Not Hangul. Not even herself reflected in the mirror. She stayed in her apartment, staring out the window at the city below, her thoughts spinning. The tension, the accusations, the unspoken feelings, they were too much. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a call from Hangul. Xandile stared at it for a long moment before reluctantly answering. "Hello," she said quietly. "Xandile?" His voice was calm but insistent. "Please, can we meet? I need to talk to you." She hesitated. "Hangul, I'm not in the mood today." "I know," he said softly. "But I think it's important. Please, just a little while. I promise it will help." Something in his voice made her pause. Finally she sighed. "All right. 30 minutes. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between their apartments. When she arrived, Hangul was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of him. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze immediately found hers. "Thank you for coming," he said. Xandile sat down, fidgeting with her hands. After a moment, she let the words spill out. Hangul, last night Ensu, she confronted me. She accused me of trying to steal you. She said it was betrayal. Hangul listened carefully, his expression unreadable. I didn't even know, Xandile continued. I never intended any of this. I've been working, focusing on my job, and she's so angry. I don't know how to deal with it. Hangul leaned back slightly, exhaling softly. Xandile, I never gave her any signal. I never encouraged her feelings. I didn't even know she had feelings for me. If she thought otherwise, it's entirely her misunderstanding. Xandile blinked, relief mixing with guilt. So, this isn't my fault? No, he said firmly. You've done nothing wrong. This isn't about you taking anything from her. It's her own feelings she's struggling with. Xandile looked down at her hands, feeling tears prick her eyes. I need a break. I can't deal with all of this right now. I need to go home. Back to South Africa, to my mother. I need to breathe, to think. Hangul's gaze softened. Then go, he said gently. Take all the time you need. She looked up, surprised. You're okay with that? He nodded. Of course. You deserve to be with your family. To reconnect with your roots. To find yourself again. A moment of quiet passed between them. Then, surprisingly, he added, if you want, I'd like to come with you. Xandile blinked, unsure she heard him correctly. Come with me. Yes, he said simply. I've never been to South Africa. I'd like to know where you grew up. To meet your mother. To understand your world. For the first time in days, Xandile felt a sense of calm wash over her. The tension, the accusations, the stress of the past week, it all seemed lighter. You really want to come? She asked softly. I do, Hangul replied. If you'll have me. A small, genuine smile appeared on Xandile's face. Then, I would like that. For the first time since her life at Hangul Group had begun, she felt a glimmer of peace. She didn't know what awaited her back in South Africa, but she knew one thing. She would face it with someone she could trust, someone who understood her, and someone who had become far more than just a colleague. As they sat together in the quiet cafe, sipping their coffee, the future felt both uncertain and full of possibility. And for Xandile, that was exactly what she needed. The warm sunlight of South Africa spilled over the rolling hills as Xandile's plane touched down. The familiar sights and scents of her homeland stirred something deep inside her, a mixture of relief, nostalgia, and a quiet excitement. She hadn't been home in months, and after the tension with Ensu and the exhaustion of her new job, she longed for the comfort of her mother's presence. When she and Hangul Kim arrived at her family home, Xandile Mbeki was waiting at the gate. The moment she saw her daughter, her arms opened wide. My child. You're finally home, Xandile said, her voice full of warmth and emotion. Xandile ran forward, hugging her mother tightly. I missed you so much, Mama, she whispered. You've grown, Xandile said, pulling back slightly to study her daughter's face. Her eyes softened as they lingered on Xandile, but then a flash of concern crossed her features. But, what's this worried look in your eyes? Xandile sighed, a small tremble in her shoulders. It's been complicated lately. With my friend Ensu, and some misunderstandings. I just needed to come home to clear my mind. Xandile nodded, guiding her daughter into the house. We'll talk later, she said gently. For now, let's just enjoy being together. The afternoon passed with laughter, stories of her childhood, and the quiet comfort of familiar surroundings. Hangul observed Xandile interacting with her mother, noting the warmth and depth of their bond. But he wisely gave the two women space, understanding intuitively that some conversations were meant to be private. Later that evening after dinner, Xandile and her mother sat together in the living room, away from the bustle of the house. Mama, Xandile began hesitantly, I want to tell you about Ensu. She's been distant lately and there was a confrontation. She accused me of things I never intended. Her voice trembled slightly. I don't know how to fix it. Xandile listened carefully, nodding. Sometimes friends hurt us unintentionally, my child. You cannot control how she feels, only how you respond. The important thing is that you stay true to yourself. Xandile exhaled, feeling some of the weight lift. I needed to be home to think, to breathe, and to be with you. Her mother smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hands. And now you are. That's what matters. After their heart-to-heart, Xandile excused herself to her room. Later, Hangul asked if he could speak with Xandile privately. In the quiet of the living room, with the last light of the sun filtering through the windows, Hangul turned to Xandile's mother, his voice steady but sincere. "Mrs. Mbeki, I need to be honest about something important," he began. "I care deeply for Xandile. She is intelligent, strong and kind. Being with her has shown me a side of life I hadn't known before. I want to spend my life with her." Xandile regarded him thoughtfully, her eyes studying the sincerity in his expression. "I am asking for your blessing," he continued. "I want to honor her and you as her mother. I want to marry her if she is willing." Her mother was silent for a moment, letting his words settle. Then she nodded slowly, a soft smile forming. "I see the truth in your heart, young man. And I trust my daughter to know what is best for her. If she chooses you, you will have my blessing." Hangul exhaled in relief, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Mbeki. I will always honor that trust." Later, when Xandile rejoined them, Hangul's expression was calm but warm. She noticed the relief and quiet joy in his eyes and smiled softly. "Mama, is everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Better than okay. Your mother trusts us." Xandile felt a wave of happiness and comfort wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly at peace, with her friend's tension momentarily behind her, with her work challenges, and with the life that awaited her. In that quiet evening, mother and daughter together and Hangul quietly watching, Xandile realized that home was not only a place, but a source of strength, guidance and love, and that sometimes, honesty and courage could create the path for a beautiful future. The days in South Africa passed in a blur of laughter, sightseeing, and quiet moments of reflection. Xandile took Hangul through the streets of her city, showing him the places she had loved as a child, the colorful markets bustling with life, the quiet parks where she had spent afternoons reading under the trees, and the small cafes where she and her mother had shared endless conversations. Hangul walked beside her attentively, asking questions, taking in every detail, and listening as she spoke about her memories, her dreams, and her family. He seemed genuinely captivated not just by the city, but by the way it had shaped her into the woman he admired so deeply. Xandile's mother watched them with quiet approval. She saw how attentive he was, how he respected and valued her daughter, and how Xandile's face lit up whenever he was near. It brought her a sense of relief she hadn't realized she needed. On the last night before they were to leave London, Hangul suggested a quiet walk along the coast. The sky was painted in shades of deep orange and purple, and the ocean reflected the colors, rippling gently in the evening light. Xandile felt the cool breeze on her face and took a deep breath. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Hangul agreed, standing beside her. For a moment they walked in silence, listening to the soft crash of waves. Then he stopped and turned to her. "Xandile," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "these past weeks with you, being here, seeing your world, getting to know your city, your home, your life, it has made one thing perfectly clear to me." Xandile tilted her head slightly, curiosity and nerves mixing. "What's that?" He took her hands in his gaze unwavering. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I love you, Xandile Mbeki. Will you marry me?" For a moment the world seemed to pause. The ocean, the sky, the city lights, they all faded around her. Her heart raced, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, barely able to speak through the swell of emotion. "Yes, I will." Hangul smiled, slipping a simple but elegant ring onto her finger. The way it caught the last rays of the setting sun made it shine as brightly as her eyes. Later they returned to her family home, where her mother had been waiting. When Xandile saw the ring glinting on Xandile's finger, her face lit up in joy. "You too," she said warmly, embracing both of them. "I couldn't be happier. Xandile, my daughter, you found someone who truly values you. And Hangul, welcome to our family." Xandile leaned against her mother, feeling the safety and love of home surround her. She glanced at Hangul, who held her hand gently, a quiet strength and devotion in his eyes. For the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Her heart was full, her future clear, and the bond between love, family, and trust had never felt stronger. As they stood together that evening under the South African sky, Xandile knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, this moment, the laughter, the love, the acceptance, would remain with her forever. She said warmly, embracing both of them, "I couldn't be happier. Xandile, my daughter, you found someone who truly values you. And Hangul, welcome to our family." Xandile leaned against her mother, feeling the safety and love of home surround her. She glanced at Hangul, who held her hand gently, a quiet strength and devotion in his eyes. For the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Her heart was full, her future clear, and the bond between love, family, and trust had never felt stronger. As they stood together that evening under the South African sky, Xandile knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, this moment, the laughter, the love, the acceptance, would remain with her forever. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your support for this channel. See you in the next story.